The subject of this video is refactoring using functions. We have some code on the left. What I'm trying to do is take four names in a list and merge them together into one big long name. Let's step through this code really quickly so you understand a little bit of what it's doing. I create a list with four names, and I create an empty variable called supername. It just has two quotes. It's an empty string, and a variable called index, which I set to 0. Now what this loop does is, as long as the value of index is less than the length of that list, it keeps adding the next name in the list onto our variable called supername, and then it increases or increments index by 1. And when it's done, it prints out the supername. Then we set names to be equal to a new list of names and do the same thing. We set supername back to be an empty string, index equals 0. And then again, for as long as index is less than the length of that list, it continues to add names on and then prints out the supername at the end. So let's run that and see what happens. Sure enough, we get two names. And just so you know, we can add another name in here. And if we run it again, now it will include that name at the very end. So it works, but if you may have noticed that we have very repetitive code in here. We've created these variables multiple times, but more importantly, we've got this while loop doing the same thing with the console output at the end. There must be a better way, and there is. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to create a new function, and we will call it, I'm going to type function to create a new function, and I'll give it a name, and we'll call it cat for concatenate names. And then we will give it a list, and then we will tell it what to do, which is exactly the same thing we've been doing in here. We'll paste that down there. And I'm going to indent this a little bit to make it look nice. Now we do need our variables as well. So I'm going to grab our variables and paste them down here. That's still inside our function. And then at the end of it, I'm going to, well, let's do console log supername, and then we'll update that in a moment. And now we can go up and we can get rid of a lot of this stuff. We can get rid of our our variable declarations. We can get rid of all that code. We can get rid of resetting our variables and the next chunk of code. And we just have it down to creating our two lists of names, and then in between each one we are going to call this function. So all we do is say cat names, names, and then down here after we've created our list the second time we just say cat names, names. And let's run this, and I suspect we are going to get an error. Oh, it does work. In some cases we have declared the function after we've called it, which in this website, repl.it, which is a great little sandbox for JavaScript, it is smart enough to look ahead. In some cases that won't work, and you should look out for that. Make sure you declare your functions before you're going to need to use them. Now, we might not want it just to print out the name. It may be that we actually want the name. And so what we're going to do is return supername, which returns it at the end of the function. So now when we call cat names, we're going to say var result equals that, and var result equals that. I'm going to take this text out. It's just cluttering things up. And then we can print result. Let's run this again. Seems to still work. We can also, I'll only change one of these, we could just say print out to the console the result of that function. We don't have to store the return value inside a variable. And again, it works. We could go a step further and we could not even declare names. We could take that list out and send that directly to the function. And it still works. And there's even more we can do. We can come in here in these places where it says supername equals supername plus names at index. Well, there's a shorthand for saying add something to myself, and that is plus equals. That's the same as saying x equals x plus y. You can say as x plus equals y. We could do that here. We could say index plus equals 1. But plus equals 1 is such a common function, there's even a shorter way of doing that. We can just say index plus plus. Let's run this again. And it still works. So there are two ways we can do this. I'm going to shorten this other one up as well. And we're going to change this to console log cat names, open paren, copy, cut all that, paste it in there. Run it one more time to make sure it works. And now let's compare it to the previous version we did. So that's what we started with. That's what we ended with. It's easier to read, it's more concise, and most importantly, there's only one place you need to change things if anything doesn't work. And that is how we use functions to refactor our code and make it more efficient.